She arrived at the maternity ward at 2:17 in the morning, barefoot, her wrapper soaked through at the hem from the gutter water she had stepped in 2 blocks before the hospital gate. Her name was Adeze Okafor. She was 31 years old. She had been carrying the child for 39 weeks and 4 days, and she had been carrying the silence for longer than that. The hospital was Corlebu Teaching Hospital, and the corridor outside the labor ward smelled of antiseptic and something older underneath it, something that no amount of mopping ever fully removed. There were 11 plastic chairs against the wall. 7 of them were occupied. Adeze sat in the 8th and pressed her hands flat against her knees and breathed the way her mother had taught her. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. The kind of breathing that was not about calm, but about endurance. The nurse at the front desk had looked at her for 3 full seconds before asking for the admission card. When Adeze said she had not been able to complete the antenatal registration because her husband had taken the money allocated for it and she would need to speak to a doctor directly, the nurse had written something on a clipboard and told her to wait. That had been 41 minutes ago. She had not eaten since the previous afternoon. She had not slept in 31 hours. The contractions were coming every 9 minutes now, which meant they would be coming every 6 by the time someone called her name. If someone called her name. Her phone had 12% battery remaining, which was enough for 1 call. She had not made it yet because she did not know which of the 2 numbers would do her the most good. The first number was her sister Nkechi, who lived in a single room in Tema with her 3 children, and who had already sent everything she could send 3 months ago, and who would answer the call and cry and be helpless in a way that would cost Adeze something she could not afford to spend tonight. The second number was her husband Obina's phone. He had not answered in 6 days. She had seen him, though, 2 days ago, outside the compound of a woman named Pauline, who lived on a street adjacent to the one where Adeze and Obina had once rented a room together. She had seen him from the window of a trotro, briefly, through the smeared glass, standing in the compound laughing in a way she had not seen him laugh in 2 years. His hand had been on the gatepost, and his shirt had been clean and pressed, which meant someone had pressed it for him that morning. She did not call either number. She sat and breathed and watched the clock above the reception desk move from 2:58 to 3:04 to 3:17. At 3:22, a contraction came that was different from the others, not sharper exactly, but longer. And something in the architecture of it told her what her body had known, and was only now telling her mind. This was no longer a question of patience. She stood, walked to the desk, and said, very quietly, that she needed to be seen now. The nurse looked up. Then she called a second nurse. Then someone in scrubs appeared from the corridor, and they moved Adeze through a set of swinging doors and into a room with a table covered in paper sheeting, and the next 7 hours became a country she had never visited before. She went through it alone. There was a midwife named Alma who came and went. There were 2 nurses whose names she did not catch. There was a doctor who appeared briefly at 5:50 a.m. and then at 7:33 a.m., and whose face she would not have been able to describe afterward. She heard herself making sounds she had not known she was capable of making. She heard the monitors. She heard the nurses speaking to each other in a register that shifted at one point into something quieter and more careful, and that shift registered somewhere below thought. At 8:17 in the morning, Adeze Okafor stopped fighting. The word the chart would use was maternal cardiac event, secondary to undetected peripartum cardiomyopathy. The word her sister would use 6 days later at the funeral in Tema was God's will, because there was no other word that could hold the weight of it without breaking. The baby survived. A girl, 2.9 kilograms, born at 8:09 a.m., 8 minutes before her mother's heart gave out in a room 8 floors above street level, where the morning light was coming through a window that faced east. They named her later. That part of the story belongs to a different hour. Obinna received the call at 9:44 a.m. He was in the compound of Pauline Mensah's house, drinking tea with evaporated milk at a table on the veranda, wearing the same clean shirt, which had been pressed by Pauline herself, using the iron she kept on the second shelf of her kitchen cupboard next to a tin of starch. The phone showed a number he recognized as the hospital. He answered it because he thought for a moment that it might be a Diazi calling from a borrowed phone to ask for something he did not want to give. The voice on the line told him. He set the phone down on the table. He sat for 4 minutes without speaking. Then, he told Pauline what the voice had said. She put her hand on the table near his hand, not on it. They sat together for another 7 minutes. Then Obinna said, "I need to go and see the baby." He said it the way a man says a thing that is true, but that he has not yet decided how to feel about. He said it the way people speak when they are calculating in real time what a situation requires of them and what it will cost. Pauline drove him to the hospital in her car, a white Kia Sportage, 2019, which she had purchased 18 months ago, and which still had the air freshener from the dealership hanging from the rearview mirror. A small pine green shape that had long since stopped releasing any scent. They arrived at 10:38 a.m. They took the elevator to the 6th floor. A nurse led them to the maternity unit, through a set of doors, and into the room where a glass-walled nursery held 8 infants in 2 rows of cots. A nurse pressed her finger to the glass and said, "That one. Second from the left." Obinna looked at the baby for 43 seconds. She was sleeping. Her fists were closed near her face. She had a full head of black hair, which the nurses had cleaned and smoothed. She was wearing a small white hospital hat. Pauline stood behind his left shoulder and said nothing. Then Obinna turned from the glass and said to the nurse, "When can I take her home?" The nurse told him there were forms. There was a pediatric review scheduled for 2 days out. There were certain procedures the hospital required before discharge. He said he understood. He said he would return on Thursday. He left. Pauline drove him back to her compound. Neither of them spoke on the way. At a junction on the Tema motorway, stopped at a light, Pauline said, "She is beautiful," and Obinna said, "Yes," and the light changed. It was Thursday when everything happened. Obinna arrived at the hospital at 10:15 a.m. Pauline was with him. He had brought a car seat, which Pauline had purchased the previous day from a shop in East Legan for 780 cedis. He had brought a bag of infant clothing, also purchased by Pauline from a different shop. He had not brought anything of a Daisy's. There was nothing of a Daisy's that had survived intact from the period of their marriage that was not still at the compound where she had lived after he left. They sat in the family consultation area of the maternity unit, waiting to complete the discharge paperwork. The room had 6 chairs and a table and a window that overlooked a car park. There was a plant in a pot in the corner that had been dying for a long time but had not yet finished. Obinna sat with his elbows on his knees. Pauline sat beside him with her bag on her lap, checking her phone. At 10:41, she leaned toward him and said something quietly. He said something back. She smiled. He did not smile exactly, but something in his face shifted in a direction adjacent to it, and if you had been standing in the doorway of that room watching them, you would have seen 2 people who were, despite everything, not unhappy. The door opened at 10:49 a.m. A man entered the room. He was not a nurse, and he was not in scrubs. He was wearing a dark blue suit, and he carried a slim folder in his left hand, and he was approximately 62 years old, and had the kind of stillness that accumulates in a person over decades of making decisions with permanent consequences. He introduced himself as Dr. Emmanuel Asante Owusu. He said he was the head of the maternal health unit. He said he would be assisting with the discharge process today. Obinna said that was fine. Pauline said hello. Dr. Asante Owusu sat in the chair directly across from Obinna and set the folder on the table between them and did not open it. He looked at Obinna for a moment. He looked at Pauline. Then he looked at Obinna again. He said, "Before we proceed with the discharge, there are some things I need to make certain you understand." Obinna said he was listening. Dr. Asante Owusu said, "Your wife was a patient here for approximately 6 hours before she passed. During that time, several things were documented." He paused for a moment. She was admitted without a companion. She had received no antenatal care in the final 11 weeks of her pregnancy. The condition that took her life is one that in most cases has a window of detectability if a patient is being monitored. She was not being monitored. Obinna said nothing. Pauline was still. She also, Dr. Asante Owusu said, had a document with her. He opened the folder. He placed 2 pages on the table. It was in the left pocket of the wrapper she was wearing when she arrived. The nurses catalogued it with her personal effects. He slid the pages across the table. Obinna looked at them. He did not pick them up. The top page was a 2-page letter in a Daisy's handwriting, dated 6 days before her death. The handwriting was steady. She had written it, he would understand later, on the night she had seen him through the window of the trotro. The night she had watched him laughing in a clean shirt in another woman's compound. The letter was not addressed to Obinna. It was addressed to the daughter she had already decided to name Chidinma. This God is good. That was what the name meant. She had written 8 pages and folded them into 2. She had written about her own mother, who had died when Adese was 14, and what she had learned from her in those 14 years. She had written about the mango tree in the compound where she grew up in Enugu, and how the light fell through it in November in a way she had never seen duplicated anywhere. She had written about what she hoped her daughter would feel the first time someone loved her properly. She had written about what it costs to stay quiet when speaking up would save you, and how she had learned that cost too late. She had also, on the final page, listed 3 things. The first was the name and address of a law firm in Osu, Accra, where a document had been deposited in April of that year under a reference number she included. She did not explain the document. She only said that it existed. The second was the name of a woman in Tema, a Mrs. Willa May Akebe, and a phone number, and the note, "She knows. She has kept everything. She will give it only to my daughter when my daughter is old enough to receive it." The third was a sentence. It read, "If I am not alive when you read this, know that I did not go easily, and know that what I left is more than what was taken." Dr. Asante Owusu watched Obinna read. He watched Pauline read the page upside down across the table and then look away. When Obinna set the pages down, Dr. Asante Owusu said, "We contacted the law firm this morning. As next of kin, there were certain disclosures they were required to make to us in connection with the child's welfare." He paused. "Your wife's name appears as the primary owner of a registered business and as the sole beneficiary of a life insurance policy taken out 27 months ago. The value of the policy is 420,000 cedis. He let that number sit on the table for a moment. "The registered business has been operating under a separate name, but the documentation traces back to her. She had been building it for 3 years. It generated approximately 11,000 cedis in revenue last month. Obina's hands, which had been flat on his knees, moved. He pressed them together. Pauline set her bag down on the floor. The policy, Dr. Asante Owusu continued, names the daughter as the sole beneficiary. Not you, the child. The policy was structured specifically to pass outside of the estate and outside of the marriage. He looked at Obina without any particular expression. Your wife was meticulous. Whatever she understood about her situation, she planned for it across approximately 2 years and 8 months. She hired a solicitor. She kept records. She filed correctly. Every document exists, and every document is valid. The room was very quiet. Through the window, in the car park below, a man was loading bags into the back of a vehicle, and a child was running in a small circle beside him, arms out. For no reason anyone watching could identify. There is also, Dr. Asante Owusu said, the matter of the child's guardianship. Because the documentation your wife left raises questions about the circumstances of this child's prenatal care and about the marriage relationship in the final months of her life, the hospital has an obligation to flag this case to the Social Welfare Office. He did not say this with any particular gravity. He said it the way a man says a thing that is simply true and that does not require weight to carry its meaning. They will conduct their own review. That is a separate process from what happens in this room today. He closed the folder. He looked at Obina and at Pauline once more. He said, the child is healthy. She is ready for discharge. But what discharge looks like, and to whom, is now a question this hospital cannot answer alone. He stood. He straightened his jacket. Someone from the Social Welfare Office will be here by this afternoon. You're welcome to wait. He picked up the folder. He walked to the door. He paused, turned, and said, with the same quietness he had maintained throughout, she came here alone, at 2 a.m, in the rain. She sat in those chairs for 41 minutes in labor, before anyone saw her properly. Whatever else this morning becomes for you, I wanted you to know that we saw her. We know what she was. He left the door open behind him. Pauline did not move for a long time. Obina sat with his hands pressed together and looked at the pages on the table and did not touch them again. Down the corridor, behind glass, in the second cot from the left in a row of 8, a girl named Chidinma slept with her fists closed near her face. She did not know what had been arranged for her. She did not know what her mother had carried through 2 years and 8 months of silence and calculation and love that was not soft but structural. The kind that holds the shape of a thing after everything else has shifted. She did not know about the law firm in Osu, or the woman named Willa May in Tema, or the document with the reference number her mother had memorized and written down so that if her hands were not available to give it, her daughter's future would still find a way to her. She knew nothing yet. She was 8 days old. She had all the time in the world to learn what she came from. There is a particular kind of provision that does not look like anything until the moment it is needed. It does not announce itself. It does not ask to be recognized. It exists in folders, in law firms, in the notebooks of women who understood that they could not always protect the people they loved in the present, and so they protected them in the future, as far forward as their hands could reach. Adaize Okafor did not survive to see what she built. She survived in what she built, in the policy number, in the business filings, in the 8 pages of a letter she carried in her wrapper pocket to a hospital she went to alone, in the rain, at 2 a.m, because she was not a woman who left things undone. The people who walked past her on those chairs saw a woman with nothing. They saw correctly what was visible. What they could not see was the architecture underneath, the 2 years and 8 months of decisions made quietly, one at a time, by someone who already knew the ending and refused to let it be the only thing she left. Some people build with what they are given. Some people build with what they are denied. The second kind of building takes longer and costs more and is almost never seen while it is happening. But it stands. If the people who loved you were quietly building something for your future that they knew they might not live to hand you, would you know it? Would you see the documents and the decisions and the small appointments kept alone and understand what they were? And if one day you found yourself holding a folded letter from someone who was gone, and you understood for the first time how far ahead of you they had been thinking, what would you do with that? Would you build the same way? Would you be worthy of what was left? If this story reached something in you that most things don't, subscribe to this channel. We are here for the people who were never meant to disappear quietly. We are here for every story where the ending was arranged long before anyone thought to look. I'll see you in the next one.